Okay, here we go. Again, please let me know if the view looks weird. So our last session today, session 8, is financial management, grant management, and reporting to the funder. And today, again, we have Scott Frump, and he, again, is the Finance and Administrative Officer for the Food Security Group within the Department of Ag, Food, and Resource Economics at MSU. We also have Dr. Nahun Zampilagre from the Livestock Innovation Lab. He's a senior researcher in the Department of Animal Production from INERA, which is the Burkina Faso Agriculture and Environmental Research Institute in West Africa. His research activities focus on livestock systems and grazing management, as well as feed and forage evaluation. And we have Melissa Ishler, who's a research technologist in biology, genetics, and agronomy, and she's the administrative assistant for the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for current and emerging threats to crops. She works on financial and grant management and financial reports to sponsors, and also works with Penn State administration to facilitate international projects. So welcome.
Thank you, Callista. So throughout the many sessions that we've had today, the overarching theme has been that communication between the sub-awardees and the prime awardee is extremely important. And I think that you'll see that that continues in this session as we talk about some of the nuances of financial reports, technical reports, pitfalls that sub-awardees can try to avoid, and in-country challenges. So in today's session, Scott, Nahun, and myself will be talking about some of the more specifics of financial reports, technical reports, and in-host country challenges, and again, some pitfalls that sub-awardees can try to avoid. So to get into it, with financial reports, it is important that sub-awardees understand that in addition to invoices, there are quarterly financial estimates that they will be providing to the prime awardee. And these are due roughly 2 to 3 weeks prior to the end of each quarter. And so specific to our current and emerging threats to crops innovation lab, what we have set up in your Basecamp accounts is a shared Google Drive sheet where you would put in any additional expenses that you have not placed on an invoice during that quarter that you expect to have on your sub-awardee during that quarter, but you have not yet expensed it. And those are due, the specific dates are listed there, but I'm not going to go into the real nitty-gritty details, but I wanted to have the detailed dates there for your reference. Then going into invoices, as Scott and Corey had talked about in session 6 about the importance of invoices. It is important to confirm that the purchases that you've made, especially if you're on a reimbursable situation, but also if you're in a situation where you're getting payments up front, that you confirm that the purchases are allowed by USAID. And you can determine whether the purchases are allowed by referring to that award contract that you were given. And you can also directly contact the management entity, Penn State in this case, and we will gladly be able to get you the information that is needed to determine if purchases are allowed or not. At the Current and Emerging Threats to Crops Innovation Lab, we require that all receipts are uploaded into a receipt tracker app that we've created and we've shared with all of our sub-awardees. And that part of Penn State's system is, in order to receive payment, each sub-awardee needs to complete a registration form with Penn State's financial system and called SIMBA in their vendor portal. These invoices can be due monthly all the way to quarterly. Ideally monthly, as Scott and Corey had indicated previously, you know, having that constant cash flow is important for the subawardee. We don't want the subawardee delaying project plans because they don't have the money to go forth with them. And then just quickly, there is a template for the invoices in the Basecamp docs and files with other details. And there's an email there of where you would actually submit the invoices. Any questions I would say that you have regarding purchases or invoices, feel free to contact me directly via Basecamp or via email. And both of my contacts informations are in Basecamp. Can we have next slide, please, Calista? Okay, I think this technical report section is where Nahun will take over.
Thank you very much. Here, I just want to remind people the different reports that need to be submitted, and the due time for those reports. I think we have two: the semi-annual report, which is due to March 31, and there is a template in Basecamp doc and file that can be used to draft those reports and then to submit in time. I think those type of reports usually is very important to get ready before the due time so that you provide a cleanup report to the lab. The second thing is the annual report, and the due time for the annual report is October 14. It's the same process. The sooner you start, the better it is for your team, and also you have the information that's needed to be reported. So for the template, again, there are some template on Basecamp doc and file that can be used for those type of reports. So this is what I can add. Thank you.
Okay, for the financial reports here, the Innovation Lab submits to USAID each year, both the quarterly financial estimate, which we've talked about in the first slide. USAID calls it a pipeline analysis, but it's basically the quarterly financial estimate. And those are the dates that the prime awardee, the management entity, would submit to USAID. So that's why it's important that subawardees get the information to the management entity about 3 weeks prior to the end of the quarter, so that the management entity can compile all the information from all the subawardees and get that information to USAID 2 weeks prior to the end of each quarter. There then is a quarterly financial report, an SF 425, that has information about reporting host government taxes, and those are due after about 30 days after the end of each quarter. And that is something that the management entity submits to USAID. The subawardees are not involved in that process. But the information from the invoices that were submitted during any specific quarter is the information that is used to create those quarterly financial reports. There is also annually due tax report regarding reporting host government taxes. This is specific to any VAT taxes, value added taxes, or customs duties that were added in host country for expenses that were larger than $5,000. There is also, throughout the entire award period, the subs, if there are any budget revisions, these budget revisions typically need the agreement officer representative of USAID, the AOR approval. And this is where communication between the subawardee and the management entity is key, because as you've heard in previous sessions, sometimes the scope of work needs to be changed, which will affect the budget. Sometimes there is an overall increase in the budget that's needed. Sometimes it's just shifting around particular funds within categories so that the total amount of the budget remains the same. But in any case where there is any shift or change of the budget, that information should be communicated with the management entity. And because we have our weekly OKR meetings, having the weekly OKR meetings allows for this constant communication between the sub-awardees and the management entity, so we can understand quite quickly any situations where a budget revision would be needed. Next slide, please. I think Scott will be speaking here.
So I'm going to be speaking about the technical reports and why they're due and how they're due, when they're due. Work plans, you can see they're due the November 29th of the first year, August of the next. Some of the other activities that as you kick off a project, environmental mitigation monitoring plans, initial environmental examination and supplemental. Semi-annual reports are due April 30th each year. Annual reports, ad hoc technical reports as requested by USAID. These are all the technical reports that are due throughout the year as we progress with our awards. We can go on to the next slide. Common pitfalls, questions, and the changing nature of USAID. Common pitfalls I see through subawardees that we always like to avoid is cash flow issues. And in order to avoid those cash flow issues, we encourage frequent monthly invoices, diligent monthly invoices from our subawardees. This provides not only cash flow, it provides opportunity for each institution to review progress of the project and the financial health of the subawardee. It provides us an opportunity to maintain accurate records with proper documentation, and then provide answers on any questions regarding allowable expenditures. Often, I think what you will find is that many of the USAID projects have expenditures that are specific to international. Something that domestic awards are very cut and dry with. I always like to tell the people that I work with is that we work often in the gray area with an understanding that these are the type of situations that here, this is what it takes to execute our agreements. So though it may look unallowable on a domestic grant, these are often allowable expenditures on USAID funds and with our partners overseas. But the best partnership is constant and consistent communication between each the sub and the prime awardee. We can go to the next slide. In-country challenges to overcome. Melissa, I think this may be your slide.
Nahoon.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, for the in-country challenges here, we wanted to highlight some challenges that our awardee can face and that need to be addressed so that work can be done smoothly. One of the things we learned from the Livestock Innovation Lab is using PESTA reporting system. Sometimes it's very challenging for our award in the countries. But for this lab, there is no need to use the PESTA, but I just want to share some information about those who are willing to use it for other purpose. Like for travel and travel requests, I think it's always better to get ready with all your files. And also for reporting, as should go through Vista, you need to get ready with all the files. And when you're organizing workshop, meeting, other conferences, you really need to prepare your file and keep them. So, but by the time you are ready to report on Vista, then you have all the material that you can you will be able to upload them and get your report done and submit it in due time. The other good thing that can be done is at the start of your project or your activity, it's better to get trained on Vista or train your team on Vista so that all the team is aware about the requirement from the platform. And very important point to also address when it's a French-speaking country is the language barriers. Usually, all the financial reporting, and it is done in English. So, but the invoices of all the expenses you need to do it. It is in French. Then you need some translation. For some invoices, you cannot translate all, but at least you need to have the title of the invoice, the amount in a dollar or in a local currency, then the change can be made. And the best way we always try to figure out this is within your fiscal team. If someone can be trained on all the reporting requirements of the award, and also some, I would say, basic teaching or learning of English, that will be very helpful in terms of managing the grant. Otherwise, sometimes take time, and the discussion going forward and backward is sometimes taking a lot of time. So those are the in-country challenges that Chief Award may face, and that I want to share with the team here. I think this is the slide, the last slide. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Now we can open it up for questions from the participants. We don't have any current questions here, so maybe we'll give people a few minutes to get their questions into the Q&A or the chat. But I had a question that I wanted to ask you all. So you talked a lot about the due dates, and those seem to be specific to USAID and or to the lab. So I was just wondering, do different funders have different deadlines for these reports?
Yes, absolutely, Calista. It's specific to the award. Those that were listed in the PowerPoint are specific to USAID. And for the quarterly financial estimates, those are specific to us as a management entity so that we have the information on the ready to provide to USAID by the USAID deadline. But clearly, it is specific to the grant, to the award, to the contract, and the due dates for those specific reports should be on the subaward contract. And if it's not on the subaward contract, the management entity should be should be providing those due dates to any of the subawardees.
And then just to touch base as to why we do these things is so that USAID can do what they call a burn rate of your award. They typically will judge everything that we report through these quarterly reports or these quarterly financials and put that into what they call a burn rate. Is this award progressing at a level that they had projected? And often with very new awards, that burn rate is very low because activities are just ramping up, contracts are being written. So that often the first 6 months of a big award, you're gonna see a slow burn rate. And so what we do is we collect this information and you utilize that to explain to USAID why this burn rate is what it is, how it's going to be increased or decreased in any particular quarter. And this is why we collect this information, not only with technical reports but financial reports, to give them a gauge as to the progress of these large awards.
Great, perfect. Thank you. We have, one just came in. Most of the donors, this is from Mesfin Retta, most of the donors are very sensitive on receiving reports, but they are not good in providing feedback on the reports. Feedback are important for improvement. What about USAID?
It depends on either the mission, if you're funded from a USAID mission, or Washington DC. I find that Washington DC is a little bit swifter with their feedback. Many of the missions are slow, to say it best, with their feedback. We try to practice patience with all of our donors. But yes, I completely agree that many of them are very slow in response. Melissa, you may have a different experience than I, but it's a practice of patience.
No, I would agree with what you have to say, Scott. Our innovation lab at the moment is all of the reports that we've had to submit have been directly to USAID. And we have gotten some good feedback in a timely fashion from USAID. So I would agree with what you have to say.
Nahun, if you have anything, please feel free to jump in as well. If not, we can move on to another question. Oh, go ahead.
I think we can move on.
Okay, perfect. Okay. How can one account for expenditure that doesn't come with receipts? For example, cost of transport via public means the public means in most of the African countries.
So the way we have done it is put together a standardized form for those activities that don't actually provide receipts. For this example, public transportation. It's a documentation issue that I guess, Melissa, you can certainly chime in. But what we do is, when we are not provided, because not every taxi cab throughout the world will provide a receipt for that ride or a public transport. But what we have done is developed a standardized documentation format for those individual expenses that don't come with receipts. But Melissa, feel free to let us know your method.
Yeah, so this is a situation where we are constantly learning, as Penn State is a new management entity. It's the first time that Penn State has gotten an innovation lab. So we are learning right along with everyone else as we're doing this. So at the moment, we have not had a situation where there was, for instance, a situation of travel where there was not a receipt that was available. However, we do expect that in the future, there may be these situations, because just as Scott said, there are many situations in host country where you are not given a receipt and you are not able to get a receipt for particular transportation. So in this way, I do believe that in the future we will need to craft a template for a specific form for the for the subawardee to fill out that has all the pertinent information, so that we have some documentation that this travel actually did occur even without a receipt. And so this may be a situation where, Scott, I will be contacting you to see, to take a gander at what your template is, what your form is for this. But this, I think, highlights the one of the important things here is that this is a community. Our innovation lab is a community. We are a community with all of our subawardees. And it is so important, the communication, which we've already highlighted many times in yesterday's sessions and today's sessions, but also the willingness to share best practices and share ideas of what worked for some subawardees, what didn't work for others. And the ability to share openly and freely and know that we are in this community together to learn and to be able to progress the innovation lab in a positive way forward, all of us together. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. What does the sub do if they don't know if an expense is allowable under the USAID Innovation Lab grant? So I guess this would be for the open call if they were awarded one of those Innovation Lab subawards.
Best practice is to ask before it's purchased. Check with your prime agency, or I'm sorry, your prime donor or subaward if it's an allowable expense. Otherwise, in the pre-award portion in budgeting, budget down to the detail of hey, it's going to be an outrageous thing. Make sure you put it in your budget. I mean, I'm something like, if you're going to host an activity, make sure it is written specifically into your budgets to provide allowability, because then it provides the prime opportunity to review your budgets in detail and authorize anything that could be questionable, and or have the chance to review it before it's been done. When in doubt, ask. I can't emphasize that enough. Ask prior to purchase, even if you think it would be absolutely allowable. You wouldn't understand anything as to why it wouldn't be. It never hurts to have an open line of communication. Send a quick email. Is this possible? Is this allowable? It's always best to ask before you do.
Yes, I agree with Scott. Please ask before you make the purchase, and always you can also dig into the prime award and sub award contracts. So here at Penn State, our prime award is flowed down to the sub award. So in their contracts, they also see the prime award that we are given from and awarded from USAID. So all the rules and regulations are in there. Sometimes it's a bit of a trail, a path. You go from one link to another link to another link to really get to the source of what is allowable and what is not allowable. But yes, absolutely. Ask questions, ask them frequently.
Okay, well, I don't see any other open questions about this session. Oh, I just got a question in. I stand corrected. Does the community have a stake in grant management?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. We all are trying to figure out best practice with award management amongst all of us. Nobody, including Michigan State University, nobody wants to have a major finding that could have a ripple effect across all USAID awards. So yes, it's best practice for us all to work together for a common goal to not have any major mishaps. Melissa, I know new to the community, but certainly it would be beneficial to all of us to not have any major mishaps.
Yes, I mean, that's why we are in communication with our subawardees, and some of our subawardees, like Michigan State, has other innovation labs, so they're pros at this. And so, yeah, I mean, we are learning together because we want to be able to adhere to all the rules and regulations that USAID has. And so we are trying to do our absolute best. And by learning within a community, we are all learning to be our best selves.
Okay, great. Nahul, did you want to say anything or should we move on?
Wait.
And I think the answer covered the question. We can go ahead.
Okay. Is there a system to track the sustainability and success of funded projects among in-country beneficiaries? Does the funder reach out to the beneficiaries often or on all projects? I don't know if that's a question related specifically to reporting, but anybody can answer that.
Okay, I will step in. About tracking the sustainability of the different projects in the focal countries. I think usually if the project has a plan to make an impact evaluation at the end of the project, there is a possibility to, from the end of the project, learn what have been done and what is the impact on the sector that was planned to be addressed. This is the first step. There are other projects also who include in their planning, like upscaling some technology or innovation that are developed within the project. And at the end of the project, the end users or other stakeholders may be interested in using it in their initiative or activities. So those aspects can be a pathway of checking the sustainability of the intervention of the project. This is something some projects use.
Okay, we got another question that came in. China has become the main supplier of various types of machines in most of developing countries, mainly African countries. I heard that USAID is very strict on rules of origin in the procurement of equipment for project purposes. What is your view of this challenge?
There isn't a strict US only rule for equipment that I'm aware of, because I mean, I know that we have purchased foreign vehicles in country many a times. It's the only real impact on US only is Fly America, where it's you're required to use US carriers in international travel. But beyond that, I have not seen a US only equipment requirement, primarily because I don't know that that would be a possibility, especially in the countries of Africa.
So there is a list of countries that USAID allows purchases of equipment to be purchased in. So for example, it's not specific to the location of manufacturing of a specific equipment, but rather the location of purchase. And I just last week gotten this clarified with our USAID representative. And the information regarding what countries are allowable to have purchases made in those countries is on a list called a 310 MAA list. Basically, it is a list that lists all the countries that USAID allows purchases to be made in and are thus reimbursable by USAID funds. And that list has been placed in each of the subawardees base camp projects in the message board. I wrote a message indicating the information and attaching the list of all the countries that is allowed. I will note that all of there are 4 focal countries, Kenya, Burkina Faso, Honduras, and Nepal, are on that list. So any purchases made within those countries are allowed. And again, it's the location of purchase, not the location of where the item was manufactured. I do think there may be some, I do believe there is some restrictions on motor vehicles. I don't think it has to be, there are restrictions on that. So I would say if you plan on purchasing a motor vehicle using USAID funds, first of all, a large purchase like that would need to be in your budget, would need to be in your scope of work, and that you should speak with your management entity. For the current and emerging threats to crops innovation lab, it would be Penn State, prior to making that purchase, because there are some rules and regulations regarding purchase of motor vehicles. In addition, there are specific restrictions of specific types of purchases. Specific fertilizers are not allowed. There are other restrictions. And in the base camp message board, I delineated the items that were restricted or ones that had partial restrictions, meaning you would need USAID prior approval for them. And if you have any questions about any of your purchases, because some of them are listed in the USAID rules and regulations with overarching general terms like agricultural commodities. Well, certainly the current and emerging threats to crops innovation lab is going to have purchases of agricultural commodities. So there are, if you have any questions about what is considered in that general broad term, please ask, because some things are in those restricted things, like specifically synthetic fertilizers, but other things like seeds are not. So please ask.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we have to wrap up. I know there's a few questions that have come through. We might have to answer those after the session is over. And this one is more of a general question that came through earlier that says it might not apply to this particular group, but maybe some of the past panelists can speak to it. It's about the impact evaluation issues in the previous slides or presentations. Have we really covered that? So I don't know if someone wants to take that on, and then I have something to say afterwards.
I don't actually prepare any impact evaluations. I'm on purely the finance side. Okay.
Yeah, that was, I think, from the previous session before you guys started. I know that was in the title. And I think Annalise did talk a little bit about that. What I would say is, if there are, then this is going to be part of the survey that we send out after the course. If there are topics that you would like a deeper dive on, we have the ability to create a module asynchronously. So not in this particular workshop, but we could potentially record something and then post it to the PlantVillage website at a later date. So if that's something you're interested in learning more about, make sure to indicate that on the survey that we send out after the course is done. So that's what I would say to that. And if you have any questions about impact evaluation, please reach out to us and we will have those answered after today's session.
I'd maybe just make a comment on that, Calista, if I can.
Sure, go ahead.
So the majority of people here in the room are from the Feed the Future countries. And then the research for development that's happening via MSU, Penn State, and elsewhere is in the United States. So you are closer to the area where the impact is happening, and you are better placed in order to do the impact evaluation. We recently just had a council meeting of all the innovation labs, and a lot of the conversation in that meeting, as well as in DC, where USAID is headquartered, is, are we having a big enough impact? And particularly around the Ukraine-Russia war and the effect on the global food security system, and then the issues around fertilizer increase and prices, et cetera, et cetera. Are we having a big enough impact? And it does not seem apparent to me that the best people to evaluate impact are those sitting in the United States or in Europe. It seems to me if we're focused on impact in Burkina Faso, then the best people would be those in the country who would be able to work with partners in that country. So keep that in mind, because we can, as Calista says, develop out a better way to do an asynchronous instruction on that. But it also should be co-developed with you, because one of the things that's quite clear is that we don't have enough responses from the countries about what is actually impacting farmers. And since our overall goal is to increase food security for farmers, all of you people in the room are the most important voices. So you're learning from people like Scott and Melissa about the accounts and the details and the rules, but we need to learn from you about what is the actual impact. So make sure that comes true. Maybe we could have a separate session so USAID will hear from you all and not just from you hearing from us. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We've got 1 minute left for today, so I think we should wrap up. And I just want to say thank you again to Melissa, Scott, and Nahun for this last session, and to all the speakers from today, and also our interpreters and our technical support from A&R Event Services, and of course the Innovation Lab, who is sponsoring this program. Would anybody like to say a few final words before we close?
Thank you, Calista, to you. Big hand to you. Yeah.
Yep.
So that was excellent.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Thank you so much for just being remaining wonderful.
Thank you so much.
2 days in a row. We have to go for 3 days. But thank you so much, and also to Renee for excellent support and help, and the whole MSU team. So thank you, Renee, as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So tomorrow morning or afternoon, whatever it is your time, we'll be at the same time tomorrow for our final day. And have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Renee.